storytellers, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another video. This video today is going to be my top 10 best books of 2021. So without any further ado, let's get into this. Now, I'm just going to say I'm not really going to talk too much about these books. I have talked about them all on my channel before, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I am going to give you a little tidbit about why I liked each one. And I thought I'd also let you know that I am starting in receding order. So we're starting with my least favorite of the favorites and working my way up to the top one. Number 10 is The Santa Suit by Mary Kay Andrews. This one I've talked about a lot recently. It's a Christmas story following this woman who moves from Georgia to North Carolina to get a fresh start on her life after a messy divorce, and she kind of ends up being part of this small little town at Christmas time, and she ends up sort of really connecting with these people, and there's a larger sort of cozy, almost mystery aspect to it, but she really ends up coming into her own and finding her place in this town, and I really enjoyed this one. It kind of had very Gilmore Girls, Hallmarky Christmas vibes, which is why I enjoyed it a lot. It wasn't the most complex story, but it was still really, really cute. Coming in at number 9 is The City Baker's Guide to Country Living by Louise Miller, and this one is one I've also read relatively recently. I read it in autumn, and it does have a lot more autumnal, fall, cozy vibes, but a similar story basically. This woman flees her life in Boston after setting it was a baked Alaska. She set it on fire and she ended up sort of setting her place of employment on fire at this big holiday gala, and she runs off to her best friend's town just to get away for a little bit, and she ends up working at this inn called the Sugarleaf, and she kind of finds her own space within this town, and there's a very sort of romancy, Lorelai meets Luke vibe to the story. It does traverse more than just autumn, but because it's centered around this apple pie contest as well, and so much of the story is set in autumn vibes, it just has that feel to it. It's kind of like Stars Hollow in autumn, and The Santa Suit is kind of like Stars Hollow in winter. So again, I liked it for similar vibes. I'm seeing a theme in the books that I read at the end of the year that ended up on my favorites list. But number 8 is The Christmas Bookshop by Jenny Colgan. This is the first Jenny Colgan book that I've read, and it's about this girl named Carmen who loses her job right before the holiday season, and her mother suggests that she go live with her sister Sophia and help out Sophia's client who owns a bookstore that he's kind of running into the ground basically, and the goal is just for them to earn a profit prior to Christmas so that maybe he can sell off this shop. But Carmen ends up finding her foothold in the Edinburgh community, and it's full of these eccentric, kind of quirky characters. It's got very small town vibes, even though Edinburgh is a city, and it's just so beautifully described. And Carmen is such a bookish reader, nerdy girl, and I vibed with her so much. It was kind of like Gilmore Girls but set in the UK. It was just because I really did vibe with Carmen. She was kind of snarky and sarcastic, and she was a little bit down on herself, but she had so much potential, and when she really just stopped fighting the world, she really came into her own, and it was kind of this great self-discovery story, and there just happened to be moments of romance and other relationship growths on the side. Number 7 is Better Together by Christine Riccio, and this is described as, I forget exactly, The Parent Trap meets something else. It was another thing that I was really interested in, and I enjoy The Parent Trap so much as a kid, so I was definitely signed up for it. It's this story of these two sisters who, because one made a choice to go live with their father when their parents had a big blowout and got divorced, they've been separated for I think over a decade, a long, long time. And by happenstance, they both go to this sort of rediscover yourself retreat at this cabin in the woods kind of camp. And they run into each other, and they have this wild idea to switch places. So they get to kind of know their parents again, know them from a different perspective, know them from the other parent's perspective, and ultimately it results in this whole family reunion, moving forward, character growth thing. Like I said, it's a really fun summer read. I loved it. Number 6 is The Mystery of Mrs Christie by Marie Benedict, and this was a really fun one. Let me explain. The Mystery of Mrs. Christie is about the 9 days where Agatha Christie legitimately went missing. No one knew where she was, no one knew what she was doing, no one knew what happened to her. She just went missing, and then she came back like nothing had happened, and she didn't explain what went on to anybody. And this novel hypothesizes what went on during those 9 days, and it is told from Agatha Christie's perspective, so it's this fun kind of in the author's head look at what is going on, and there's like mystery upon mystery within it. It's full of like the drama, but also the like, it's so addictive. I could not put this story down. I really, really wanted to know what was going on, because like with many an Agatha Christie type story, you get the sense that there is more going on to the story than like what's going on the surface right away. And all I wanted to do was dig for answers. So this one was a very bingeable read, and I enjoyed it. Coming in at number 5 is The Camelot Betrayal by Kirsten White. This is the second book in the Camelot Rising series, and in this one, I'm trying to remember because I'm currently reading the third one and I don't want to confuse the details or spoil anything, so I'm just going to say that right now. My description's probably not going to be great. But Guinevere has sort of encountered some new obstacles in Camelot, and she's still trying to uncover the truth of who she is as a person, because she feels like she can't do her job as Queen Guinevere or even as the witch Guinevere properly until she really knows who she is and where she's coming from, what she's supposed to be motivated by. The sequel, this Camelot Betrayal, the one is right in the middle of the trilogy. It's both its own kind of, it works really well. Like, it's a well done piece, but it also, because it's the second book, it is transitioning to the big conclusion novel. So it has that element of like being fillery, but it's not. It's definitely not super fillery. It just has to be kind of fillery in order to get you to that next bit. So there's a huge cliffhanger at the end, and I didn't really see it going that way, so it was really fun to get to, and it was annoying to have to wait as long as I did to read this last novel, but I'm reading it right now, and it's still really, really good. So this is definitely a story I'd recommend for anybody who's a King Arthur fan. Just a little trigger warning for number 4. This novel that I'm about to mention deals with some really heavy topics, most especially death and grief and life in general. So just know that going forward, listening to this next critique, but also if it's something that bothers you, just skip ahead. Number 4 is Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune, and this follows a gentleman who passes away from a heart attack literally right at the beginning of the story. I'm not spoiling anything for you. It's in the synopsis that he is a ghost, and he's at this sort of way station where a ferryman who is supposed to help him cross over is kind of helping him make peace with his life and sort of mentally, and in some cases kind of literally, set his life to rights, you know, not leaving anything unfinished so that he can cross over and move on. And it's this really like achingly real at some points story about death and grief and loss and moving on, and it was so like poignant and sometimes painful and also like absurdly funny at other points. I was legitimately laughing out loud. I loved these characters. I loved their bonds together. I loved the little life they had going, and it was so hard not to enjoy all of them. I really appreciated the grandfather in this story though. Like, he's so like Stassi, not gonna put up with your BS kind of guy, and he's just hysterical the entire time. And Wallace, I remembered his name now, the main character, is somebody he's very selfish, very self-involved, self-centered, all the self kind of vibes you can get at the start of the story. He doesn't think about anybody but himself and how other people can affect his goals. That's the closest he gets to thinking about other people. He doesn't spend a lot of time concerning himself with their feelings. And at the end of the story, he's really grown, and that's a great journey to go on in and of itself. But like I said, it's like this achingly real story, and that these are very real emotions that people go through, and it's the absurdity of being upset and sad and laughing all at the same time. And I think that's an aspect of death and grief that people shy away from, is that it's sometimes absurdly funny and sad at the same time. And it's a really complex kind of emotions that this book deals with, but it does it in such a beautiful, gentle, kind of well thought out way. So I very much recommend it. I think I liked it even better than The House on the Cerulean Sea, which I also really love, but I think this one, he's like really started to hit his stride. Number 3 is The Bucks in the Woods by Maureen Johnson. Yes, Stevie Bell cracked my top 3. I love her. I can read Stevie Bell all day, every day. She is so much fun as a character. You get to know her in the Truly Devious series, where she goes to Ellingham Academy to take on this cold case, and of course, things start happening as she's there, and she has to solve 2 cases at once, basically. She's like a little spitfiery Sherlock Holmes, Hercule Poirot, Miss Marple, everybody wrapped into like one modern day body, dealing with all the things. She's she's so real in the sense that like she has doubts about herself and she has anxieties and she's dealing with all this real stuff, to the point where like she becomes removed about these cases, and then she has to remember that there's real people involved in them. And this one was just a really great kind of growth for her, in that she was dealing with actual people who were left behind after a crime, rather than it being a decades old cold case where there's no one around anymore. So it's almost clinical in its scientificness, if that makes sense. And in The Box in the Woods, that's not the case. She's actually dealing with real people and real consequences in real time. And it's really, really, really well written. And it has that really, I'm saying really a lot, it has an awesome like 70s, 80s campy horror movie vibe to it, especially the parts where you get the past from the characters who are, you know, murdered in the mystery that Stevie's trying to solve. So it's so much fun. I would really recommend it. It's another good summer read. I know that sounds kind of twisted, but it's really a summer camp story. It's another story set at a summer camp, only this one's there's some murder involved. What can you do except solve the murder if you're Stevie Bell? It's so much fun. I highly recommend it. Number 2, getting down to the end here, folks, is The Book of Life by Deborah Harkness. This is the conclusion to the All Souls trilogy, and it returns our characters to the modern setting that you meet them in Discovery of Witches, and this is where I think the story has its stride, because it is so good. It wraps things up. Nothing gets kind of left like as a string in the wind, you know, no loose ends are untied. You get wrapped up really nicely without it feeling like this kind of cheesy, everything's fine at the end kind of ending. It still feels like the characters are going to have a lot to struggle with moving forward, just life struggles, but they've kind of done what they set out to do. And I don't want to say too much because it'll spoil the series for you, but it's so good. It's so good. I think it delivers on the witchy vibes, the dark academia vibes, the vampire story vibes, the demon story vibes. You get so many things packed into this one story. You get historical fiction vibes. You get, what else? So many things. And you can tell, you get foodie vibes. You can just tell that Deborah Harkness really has a passion for all of these things. And so she doesn't leave anything feeling like it's just there because she likes it. You know what I mean? I feel like sometimes authors put things in books because they like it and not because it serves the story. But in this series, and especially this last book, you can tell she loves all of it. And it was the stories were a love letter to all of these things that she clearly has a passion for. And nothing felt like it was not necessary to the story. Like I said, it all wrapped up expertly. And it was so well written, and I highly, highly recommend it. All right, are you ready? Last but not least, number 1, my favorite read of 2021 was Any Way the Wind Blows by Rainbow Rowell. This follows our hero, Simon Snow, and his boyfriend Baz on the epic conclusion to their epic adventure. It ended up being less an epic fantasy conclusion than I was expecting. They definitely hinted at a bigger bad, new kind of boss level villain to fight, and it wasn't that. It was more a story about the characters kind of growing out of high school and growing into adulthood. It was very coming of age, more so than the first 2 were, in terms of the fact that the characters were kind of all wrestling more with less actual like foes that are standing there that we have to fight with a sword kind of battles, and more internal, who am I gonna be for the rest of my life kind of battles. And on the one hand, I get how not having a big bad would be kind of dissatisfying, given the fact that it seemed to be pitched like we were going to get that, and it wasn't that kind of story, but also because of the first two, there is a legitimate, like, big bad that they're fighting, and in this one, they're kind of just fighting themselves. But I really appreciated it, and I think it wraps the characters up really nicely without totally closing the door on them. I think there's room for them to come back should Rainbow Rowell want to, but I also think it's okay that they're left where they are. You get the sense that they don't have it all figured out yet, but they kind of know at least in what direction they want to go. I want to say I reviewed this one, so you can probably find that somewhere on my channel. I've talked about it. I know I have. I've talked about all of them, but I wasn't mad. I really loved the ending. Just to Any Way the Wind Blows, and also to the Simon Snow trilogy. I thought it was a good way to wrap it up. I was happy with what the characters learned by the end of it, and happy where they were heading and what they had left behind, what they needed and didn't need anymore. I felt like we were really, really okay. And I feel like that was actually kind of the vibe that we were going for, right? It's because so much of the trilogy, they're not okay. They have so much going on that they don't have time to deal with, like, how it's mentally, in some cases physically, affected them throughout their teenage years. You know, they weren't done formulating who they were as people when they were getting thrown into these situations, and I think it was really well done to see them have to grapple with, like, okay, who am I, instead of, okay, there's somebody new to fight. And I think it was realistic that Simon struggled with that the most, because he's never had time to figure that out, ever. So the fact that that's what he's confronted with, his ultimate battle is himself, is really deep and beautiful in a way that you might not necessarily see the story as, unless you sit there and ruminate on it for a while like I did. That is it for my top 10 reads of 2021. If you enjoyed this video, let me know by leaving a like down below. What was your favorite read of 2021? Or you can list all 10. You know, if you have 10 favorite reads you want to share with me in the comments, feel free to do so. I'd love to know if there's any awesome stories I missed out on, but absolutely do let me know your #1 favorite read, because, again, I'm still curious. So share as much or as little as you like. I would love to know either way. But for now, if you want to keep up with me and all my bookish adventures, you can go ahead and click the subscribe button. And of course, I highly recommend that you ring the little bell so that you don't miss a beat, because it notifies you every time I post a new video. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!